The Hay Band Network.
Welcome to the Hay Band Network. Today we have another series in our diversity series, and today we are going to talk about On the List, a pretty new project that you are going to learn about today on selecting music and music that's available for people to use and program, and how they relate to state lists for band directors. And so we have two fantastic guests here with us. And so first we have Amy Rever-Oberle from the Hart Middle School. She's been a band director there for 6 years in Michigan. So welcome to the Hey Band Network, Amy.
Thanks very much.
Glad to have you. And our other guest is Dr. Brandon Houghtalen from Abilene Christian University here in Texas. He is the Associate Director of Bands and Assistant Professor of Music. He's been there for 7 years. And both of you are creators of On the List. So welcome, Brandon. Welcome to the Hey Band Network.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
And so I did an interview a couple weeks ago with some fantastic people, and in the conversation they talked about On the List, about state list. And so in researching that on Facebook, found out about this, that you all started. So tell us about On the List.
Well, On the List is an organization made up of teachers who are passionate about giving their students the best available music. And what we have found is that when teachers go out and they research and they want to perform music at concert band festival or large group performance evaluation or contest or whatever you call it in your state, a lot of times they're limited on what they can perform because you have to pick pieces off the list. And the makeup of those lists in our states is all too often very white and very male and very dead. And we're a part of a living art form, and the heritage of the band is to premiere new works and to celebrate living composers. And so part of our mission is to amplify the initiatives that are going on all over the country. And part of our mission is to help teachers add worthy pieces to their state list.
And that's great. I mean, that's what we want to do is to do that. So, Amy, how did you get involved in this On the List?
I've taken a bit of a meandering route to get to making it to On the List, but I had a moment a few years ago. I was rehearsing Julie Giroux's March of the Sun-Dried Tomatoes with my kids, which is a riot. If you have not done it, I highly recommend it. But I used female pronouns when I was talking about the composer. I'm like, we blew some accidentals. I'm like, guys, I'm not sure that that's the interpretation that she would have wanted. And I stopped for a second and I went, oh, I couldn't tell you the last time that I used female pronouns when I was talking about a composer for kids, for the music that I was playing with my kids. And it wasn't anything intentional. It wasn't like I was going out there and like, oh, I can't play this person and can't play that. But those are the people, as a young director, I use the list as kind of my gateway, as a guide. Who should I be playing? What music should I be playing? And that's a very, very limited option when it comes to those things. And so I started setting a goal for my students and for myself that I wanted to pick pieces for every concert cycle, at least one by a female composer and or a composer of color. And I hit a roadblock when we got to festival season, because trying to find pieces that fit my group and fit that goal was almost impossible. And so I started reaching out and trying to find some different resources for, pieces of music, which ended up connecting me with Rob Deemer from the Institute for Composer Diversity, which connected me with Brandon. And Brandon has kind of absorbed me and my goals into On the List. And we've been able to work with Brandon and the Institute with creating some different resources, and Brandon and I are excited to be able to continue to really compound on that work and really amplify it and get it out there.
Excellent. And so where can our audience find On the List?
Right now, Facebook is the best place to find us. We are working on expanding our social media presence a little bit, and the website is currently under construction. Like we were saying, this is definitely a newer initiative, but we are trying our best really get things out there. And unfortunately, as things were starting to kind of take off, and I feel like we really gained some steam, the world blew up. And that did put a speed bump in things, but you can definitely find us on Facebook. It's just the On the List project, and we're working on trying to make that a more active presence.
And so the On the List project, and Brandon, I'll send this to you. Is this a document, or is it just some protocols or some models or some ways to
Sure.
promote this?
Well, I'll say this. In 2017, Tremont Kaiser, Rodney Dorsey, and Jackie Hartenberger and I did a session at the Midwest Clinic on music, on repertoire by composers that we were passionate about. And we had a huge list, and we kind of just talked about why we were passionate about this great music. And afterwards, that's when people came up and they said, "This is terrific. I'll have to wait until my spring concert because, none of this is on the list." Mm-hmm. And, it's really hard to do certain pieces of music on the spring concert because the spring concert has a feel and it's got a purpose, and you want to be honoring your seniors and your graduates. And, a lot of people do pops kind of music on something like that. Basically, that's when it started for me that, okay, this is going to have to be in every state list is going to have a person that's passionate about this to help grease the wheels and just draw attention to the fact that, yeah, American Guernica should be on every state list because it's an amazing piece of music. It's incredibly artistic. It's beautifully put together, and it requires a very good ensemble. But it's very well worth 6 to 8 weeks of study. And there are pieces like that at every grade level. They just don't often find themselves on the list. And so I wanted to get back to that a little bit about why I'm passionate about this, because I just want our students to perform these great pieces, these masterworks that they can't right now because it's just not on the list yet. Where we're going is kind of informed by where we were. Where we started was, each person deciding, okay, this is going to be something that's important to me. And eventually it became about removing the obstacles for other people, right? And so you're starting to work with the state organization. I was working with Dr. Brad Kent, who's the state director of music for UIL. And, that first year I picked out 10 masterworks and sent them in for the regular submission process. And one of them was picked. And I'm like, well, at least we got one of them on there. But then the very next year, he announced the PML Diversity Initiative, which has been active, I think, 2 years now. And so more pieces are being added to the list over time. So people will have the opportunity to choose a piece that previously was not an option for them. And so now that we're gaining traction in each of our states, what we're doing now is we're taking this success that we've had and making it available and making these resources something that it's just copy paste wherever you live. Amy has been incredibly successful in the state of Michigan, which is why, I learned from her something almost every time we talk about how, oh, you just have a conversation and it's this, and then boom. And she's got worlds of experience in the middle school rep, which is amazing. And we need that. Again, I think every child deserves great music at every grade level. So that's why we're starting to now branch out into social media, into a website, making the Facebook page a little bit more active. Is we're coming from behind the scenes, and now we're trying to help everybody that we can.
We've been fortunate twice this year. One was one that a webinar that Brandon hosted, and another one was one that was hosted through NAFME, I believe, in regard to discussions on state lists. And those had, decent number of people who were involved, but immediately afterward, we had people from multiple states reaching out and contacting us individually, and as kind of an organization here, saying, what tips do you have? What ideas do you have? How can we take those things that we've learned from other places, and incorporate that into our own experience with our own lists. And so, like Brandon said, we're really trying to put those things out there that we've started learning as we've been through these processes in a few different states, to help others work on theirs.
And it's great. I mean, the project sounds fantastic, what you're doing. And now it almost sounds like it's at a place where you got to get more people on board to get it to grow, because there's more state lists for that. So what are things that our directors are doing maybe in other states? I mean, obviously, Brandon, you're doing the work with Dr. Kent, which is great, who runs the UIL in Texas. Amy, sounds like you've got some stuff happening in Michigan. But for people in other states that might see this, are there initiatives happening? Are there things they can do? How can a director maybe improve their list if they're not borrowing a list from another state already?
I think the first thing is to understand how your state organization goes about updating their lists. The more I get into this, the more I'm learning that every state has really got their own process. Some places do it every 3 years. Some places do it every year. Some places have got a committee. Some places there's just a couple people who decide it. Some places, in Michigan, we don't get publisher suggestions. Everything that comes to our committee, and we do it every year, it comes purely from directors around our state. And it's coming from 7 through 12 directors. It's not coming from a university level. And I'm learning that in other states, it's, universities have a much bigger presence in that process. And it's only done every few years. So the first thing is figuring out what your system is so that you can understand how to work within it. Because every state has their own process, and what worked in Michigan is not necessarily going to work in Texas.
And Kansas and Florida and Virginia and several states. It is true that in the past several months, there's been a far greater interest in diversity, equity, and inclusion in general in the United States. And I think that directors are awakening to this understanding that the curriculum needs to look more like the students in the ensemble and in the community. And even in the case where the ensemble is fairly homogeneous, maybe the music can be more representative of society and the world. I was just going to say it's colorful music, picking music from all the music available.
It's just as important for our kids to experience music from people who look like them as it is for them to experience music from people who don't look like them. It's music we're all about expanding our kids' worldview, and if everything always looks and sounds like what they already know, then we're really doing our kids a disservice.
Yeah, for sure. And we see that some of the pieces that we talked about earlier, some of the things that have gone through I guess, if you will, popularity or played a lot, are the composers that are traditional pieces in the band world, either in some cases at some of the higher level stuff that schools use. And you see that there's a movement happening, but I think it's been propelled to what's happened in the last few months also. And some of the projects that have come out of this, everything we're dealing with too.
Years ago, all that we had were pieces about other cultures, variations on a Korean folk song of John Barnes Chance or La Fiesta Mexicana of H. Owen Reed, which are amazing pieces. And those composers lived in those countries and absorbed that culture and really honored the culture and wrote a piece. And what that opened the minds and the ears and the doors so that all of that could come into the music classroom for those students. And that's fantastic. And of those pieces I don't think will ever go away because they are classics and they deserve to be performed. But now what we have greater access to composers themselves from other countries and from different ethnicities that really work great. And what we're discovering is there have been pieces written by women and composers of color that maybe we didn't catch the first time, but we're finding those hidden gems, and we're championing the works of living composers. And it's really coming into, it used to be the thing that you called somebody and said, hey, what can I do? And now everybody knows, because the internet makes this music instantly available, and it's so fascinating because you can find this music so quickly. And so again, that obstacle though is, well, but then it has to be on the list. So that's where we come in.
Great. Anything regarding on the list for stuff, for somebody trying to get involved with this? How can they do more for their state, or for, even if it's just picking for a musical programming within? What are things that you all provide through this project that can help a director out anywhere in the U.S.?
What we can do is, if you contact us through Facebook or through the website, we can connect you to the people in the state that you're in. Most of the states now, we kind of have at least a contact, if not a direct collaborator that's interested in this process. And as Amy said, sometimes they're off cycle, like it won't be their turn to pick a new list for another couple of years. But if people contact us, we can put them into contact with people in their state. But we don't necessarily do letter writing campaigns. We follow the established procedures by these states. We honor, most of these committees are made up of band directors, teachers, and just like us. And so we honor that work that they do, because I know in Texas, they get hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of submissions, and just listening to all of them and critiquing them and making sure that those would be worthy for students to study for concert contest or concert evaluation. Now, that's really important. And we don't want to antagonize those groups. We just want to help that work happen.
And we're looking to provide, resources, whether it's names of composers, links to pieces themselves. We mentioned before, we've worked in partnership with the Institute for Composer Diversity, and they put out early over the summer, basically the list of lists. And it's, pieces that are on at least listed in one other state right now, which is an amazing resource. I actually went off of that myself when we were looking for suggestions for Michigan's list again, and I found new pieces again that I was not familiar with, and new composers. So, some of it's the how do I get around to it and working on the list, but some of it is also, but now what do I do with, okay, I know who to contact, but what are titles, who are some of these composers that I can look for?
In addition to working with the conductors and the music teachers, we also have a bunch of resources for composers, because
Absolutely.
Composers themselves need to know, how are pieces graded? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a grade 4 in Texas versus a grade 4 in Georgia? Because those are different, because in Texas, we only have 5, and in Georgia, they have 6. So that's going to be a different piece, and that's just going to fall differently. So we're working with composers also. For example, if you submit a perusal score that is incomplete, that misses pages, then a committee might not view that very favorably, because how can they evaluate the piece if not all the pages are there in the score? Or if you have a weak recording, or if you just have a MIDI recording. For example, in Texas, that isn't acceptable. You must provide a real recording of a live ensemble. And so there's just little rules, little guidelines that we try to help composers understand.
And you'll find that a lot of underrepresented composers are often working with smaller publishing companies. They're self-publishing. So a lot of these, we're hoping that being able to put these resources out there that they might not have if they were working with some of the, the bigger publishers, the bigger clearinghouses, we can help those composers advocate for themselves along with some of those bigger name, organizations and groups, to help their music be as visible.
Yeah, I love that. So you're both band directors, and you obviously, because of this project, you come across lots and lots of music. So what are some ways? So I'm highly interested. I'm a band director. I'm all in. Like, how do I find more pieces? What are some things you have both done to find more composers that maybe aren't on our household names that we see on the list, to add them to the list?
When I first started, honestly, I actually put out some stuff on my blog and on social media. I'm like, who are some, underrepresented composers with some lit. As a middle school teacher, I'm always looking for stuff that, that my kids can access, that my kids can play. And that was like step one, which then led me to like Jody Blackshaw has an amazing site and she's got it listed by grade level of pieces by female composers. And that put me over to Institute for Composer Diversity. So there are more and more places, Jody Blackshaw and just her whole, the colorful music and things like that were places where I started. And then, A led me to B and B led me to C, and that all led me to Brandon, and that all led me to and then once you start diving into those things, like I've got just like I said, I started going through that list of lists, and I've got like a little list myself of things, someday when we're able to play again together, that I'd really love to get for my kids and get on those stands in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I had graduate school to give me some repertoire classes and some wind literature, and Wayne Bailey at Arizona State one day kind of offhand said, "Oh, here's James Reese Europe, fascinating guy, really influential in early jazz, had a band that went to France in World War I. He invented the word gig, really great guy, died young. Okay, next, let's move on." And I thought, wait a minute, tell me more about this guy. And so because I was in graduate school, I could really spend the time to research James Reese Europe. Absolutely amazing, important bandmaster of his time. He was murdered, so he didn't live long enough to really realize his potential, but he released some of the most influential recordings of the Memphis Blues and the St. Louis Blues very early, 1919. And people were taking actual solos. And some of the earliest recorded improvisation that we have. He's a fascinating figure. So Google James Reese Europe and listen to his band, the Harlem Hellfighters, 369th Infantry Regiment. Amazing story. Alex Shapiro is a great composer and advocate, and she has programming resources on her website. Very long list of resources. We've mentioned Jody Blackshaw. She also has a website, Colorful Music, that lists a lot of resources. Our website forthcoming will kind of bring together a lot of these. The Institute for Composer Diversity has a database, a searchable database. Christian Michael Folk also has a searchable database of music. So basically it's just a Google away. You're gonna find something, and you're gonna be able to tell quickly that this is kind of coalescing and coming together as a cohesive body. That's kind of, this is what the cool kids are programming, I mean, we're still playing John Mackey, and John Mackey is wonderful, and we're performing Kate Nishimura, and we're performing all these people.
Yeah, that's great. It's a great way for the director to go to the next step. Okay, now I'm interested. Where do I find? And all those spots and those composers and those sites are great tools and resources for someone that's not sure where to start looking to improve their programming. So the last question I have on this is just for programming for a concert or a series of concerts that you might do. Obviously, we're in a completely different time now, has thrown a little curveball at us. In some way, it's been good, I'm sure, for some of the projects out there. But what are some things, Amy, that in terms of a director just programming to kind of, I want to be a little more diverse in my program and inclusive and look for different things. What are some things maybe you've done with your band program? You talked a little bit about it earlier that directors can use.
So along with using those sites and stuff like that, something that I've started using in my classroom is I have a bulletin board. It's called our Who We're Playing board. And I put up pictures of our composers along with a QR that links to whatever their accepted their bio is on their official site or anything like that, and then a legal recording of the piece of theirs that we're playing. As a middle school teacher, there's a lot of the basics and a lot of logistics we have to spend time on, so I don't really get to do a lot of deep dives into who these composers are, but just the fact that my kids can see people and they can connect. I love walking over to the board and I'd be like, what do you think he thinks about this? What do you think she was looking for at this moment? And it makes that composer a person, and it makes that music more relatable and more connectable. So that, we're starting to shift the cycle. If my kids now are starting to see that those are the kids that are going to be making it up to the university level to you guys, and they're going to be the people who are composing the stuff for the next generation. So if we're making that more connectable for our students, I think that that's so important. It's not just a name of some random, dead person on their page that they've never connected with. It's now another layer that we can add in to that educational experience. I also very much enjoy putting together, short lists of things and having my kids pick something. Here are some composers and some things that I'm interested in for the list for this year for festival. What do you guys want to do? Which of these things speak to you? And again, it's all about connecting our kids with their music and connecting them with people and places and things beyond the experiences that they have now, because these are our future musicians. These are our future composers. And selfishly, I want to play really cool music for my whole career and beyond. And if we don't continue to inspire the kids that are in front of us, how is that going to continue to happen?
The thing that I love about our profession, and that if there is something good that has come from Zoom and COVID and, is we're far more connected, and we've broken that barrier. We're actually using the tools available to us. And so, yeah, guest speakers, that's easy now. You can actually have an authentic experience. This summer at the Governor's School, Tennessee Governor's School for the Arts, I conduct the Wind Ensemble, and it's typically a 4-week residential program of the very best upcoming juniors and seniors in the state of Tennessee. And it's a tremendous band. Oh my goodness, they're wonderful students, and they play like $1 million. And this year we weren't able to do like in-person things, but I still had Kevin Day Zoom with the band, and he got to talk about writing a trumpet concerto for Jens Lindemann and a euphonium concerto for Demondre Thurman, and the trumpet players and the euphonium players. Oh yeah, we know those people. You've written for them and you're 24? And yeah, and so it's just this wonderful moment of like, wait a minute, I'm 17 and you're 24 and you've done that, and is that possible? And Kevin was like, yeah, it's possible. Here's what you do. Here's what I did. I wrote music, and my high school band director played it, and my college band directors played it. And so that if there's a silver lining in all of this, I feel like it's that we're far more able to share ideas with each other and to visit with one another, and hopefully we can keep that up ongoing.
And my experience has been so far with a lot of these composers, they're living composers. So they're out there and available to do stuff like this. We actually did a Skype session with Kevin Day in December. And same thing, my kids they were totally floored that there's this guy, like he had, if I remember right, he had some movie posters behind him for like recent movies. And again, it was just another one of those things, like my kids got totally sidetracked. We weren't talking about music or his composing. They wanted to talk to him about like the Terminator poster on the back, on the back of his wall, because that humanized him. We were able to talk to Kate Nishimura earlier this year when we were working on one of her pieces, and it was the same thing. She's an educator. She writes from an educator's perspective, and the way that she was able to interact with kids, again, it brings that music to them. It's not just dots on a page. It's a full experience, whether they're a 6th grader who's still learning how to open their case, or a 12th grader who's going on into college and looking for, the next step in their musical career.
This is great. I mean, just great, and how people can reach out to the composers, the value of that, and then the kids just absolutely learn a lot out of it and connect to that also at the same time. The work that you two have done is really cool. I'm impressed. It's a couple years old, I think, is what I saw, 2018, for this On the List project. And to see what you and listen to you talk about what you put into it, and what a lot of people are getting out of it. It's got to be rewarding for both of you. Any final thoughts for you on the list, Amy?
I would just like to throw in, Brandon always like, oh, Amy's done these things with the Michigan list, and I'm like I was talking about before, but it's working within our system because it's a teacher-driven system. Because we have those capabilities to do that, I was able to take them a huge giant list of mostly underrepresented composers. But what's really cool now is our state VP, who's in charge of that, has taken that and she is running with it. Matt Shepard was our guy a couple years ago when I brought him, like, I don't know, 120 titles, and we went through through, and we had this like 9-hour, marathon listening session. And he ran with it, and he was very cool. But now Liz Herring has actually taken it another step. And I'm really proud to say that Michigan's list, you can now actually search our list for composers of color and for female composers. So you don't just have to cycle through, because if you're looking at Smith, is it Robert W. Smith or is it Sarah A. Smith? Her piece, Into the Dragon's Keep, is a really fun piece. But if you're just seeing Smith, you don't know that. So now you can search for female composers and for composers of color. We're eventually hoping to add LGBTQIA+ composers, but we're working on making sure that those are verified through organizations like Institute for Composer Diversity, so that we're being respectful of those composers. But that's going to be another search option, so that again we're able to reach more kids, and we're able to expand our net, even further, to be able to connect our kids with our music and just people out there in the world who are doing these things professionally.
Great.
Yeah, I mean, people program for different reasons and different methodologies in different ways. And I think that what all of us are trying to do is pick the very best music available, and there are some really amazing composers out there, and we're just trying to make the lists as much as we can representative of the best music that's available. We all know that there are certain composers that have huge catalogs that they're called list pieces, because they're written kind of for that purpose, and they're all pretty much the same. And those are valuable for what they are, but that shouldn't be the limit of our list. That shouldn't be the only thing that we're going for. To me, quality is far more about individuality and voice, and much less about consistency and sameness. When we're talking about a piece of art, and what we're teaching our students through those pieces of art. I could talk about this subject for forever, but in terms of resources to get people going, and like, where do I go? What do I Google? What names do I need to know? Jeff Gerard at Midwest Sheet Music has some really great spreadsheets of, if you just want a big spreadsheet full of music written by Black composers, he can send you that. Because he sent me that 3 or 4 years ago when I was interested in some of this. There's just so much amazing music written by the Dean of African American Composers, William Grant Still. From the Delta is a 3-movement suite, and I've paired it with the Holst suite in E flat before, and it's an amazing side-by-side 3 movements, relatively the same length overall, by 3 different composers from 3 different backgrounds. And the craft that's inherent in both of those pieces is stunning. And the spiritual, the second movement From the Delta, I think is one of the most stunning things ever written for the band. And I think it'd be a shame if people didn't know about that. Beautiful music. Kevin Day, we've mentioned as a composer, Omar Thomas, Jennifer Jolly, both of whom, those 2 teachers are now teaching at Texas Tech and the University of Texas. So they're in state now. Haley Woodrow, another great Texas composer, Kate Nishimura, Toshiro.
Yukiko Nishimura. There's 2 Nishimuras.
Yes,
yes.
And both are wonderful.
And as a middle school director, I love them both because they write well for young groups. That's not something you can say about everybody.
So I would just Google names. You're going to run across, these are the new cool kids in the band world writing for music. And, alongside the names like Curnow and Alfred Reed and Stephen Bryant and John Mackey, I mean, these are the people that we're talking about. And I think they deserve to be represented on the state lists.
Well, I commend you both on the work you've done. If anybody's made it all the way through the end of this and they don't have a new composer or site to go through, we're in trouble. But the amount of stuff that you guys have shared with us and shared with the Hey Band on resources and how to better program and look at different ways for programming for our band program is great. And then also just the promotion of On the List. And the most important part is to expand those lists and create more diversity through those and more, as you said, to what is sitting in front of us in our band halls, in our band rooms. And we have music available for evaluation time that fits our students' needs and that they can relate to more than maybe we've had in the years past. And so congrats to you all on the work you've done so far. I'm sure it's just roll your sleeves up and keep going. So thank you for sharing that. One of my favorite parts of the Hey Band network is to just let you all do a few shout outs. I'm going to start with Brandon. You have any shout outs for the Hey Band?
Well, the Big Purple Marching Band's getting ready to move in tomorrow and Friday. And I just, whenever we say anything as a director, the first thing that we say is, "Hey band," and they say, "Hey what?" And so as soon as I saw your name of the podcast, I was like, "This is perfect. This is come on to Abilene anytime." But my shout outs will just be to every music teacher out there. We got each other's backs. We can do this.
Awesome, thank you. And Amy?
I'm gonna borrow the same one. Just we are all in a really weird spot right now. So I'm just shouting out to every music educator out there right now who is trying their best to give their kids an engaging musical experience in some of the least engaging circumstances we could possibly have. So that's my shout out. I love my department and my colleagues, and I'm so fortunate to work in a district where I feel like, music is supported, and I know that's not the thing everywhere. So to everybody who's fighting the good fight one way or another, all my love to all of you.
Amy Rever-Oberle and Brandon Houghtalen, thank you very much for joining the Hey Band Network. If you'd like to see other videos in the Hey Band Network, check out our YouTube channel, Hey Band Network, for our other videos in the diversity series, leadership series, and remote teaching series. Thank you all for joining us.